Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at a ultra budget 120mm tower cooler from GELID. This is the Tornado. Is it any good? Let's find out. So today we'll be taking a look at GELID's Tornado. Now this is a 120mm tower cooler, which is a pretty typical design, if I may say. It looks very nice. Very cheap price, around about £22 here in the UK, which I think is actually brilliant value for money, and definitely within the sort of budget area that I'm particularly interested in. Now this has a TDP of 160 watts and has 4 6mm heat pipes built into the copper base. Also has a relatively low noise fan, which regulates between around about 650 to 1600 RPM, so very nice spectrum of speed there, and should keep it nice and quiet. Socket compatibility, it's compatible with pretty much all Intel processors and AM4 and AM3, all those kinds of things. There is information on the front of the box which tells you, so it's looking at Intel sockets from 775 all the way to 2011, and also includes the latest 1200 series. On the AMD side of things, we're looking at everything from AM2 upwards, and also including FM1, FM2, AM4, etc, etc. So AMD wise, pretty much all the bases are covered. Taking a quick look around the rest of the packaging, so it goes into more detail about some of the options there. So again, 4 heat pipes, intelligent PWM curve on the fan, silent operation, high airflow, double layer fan blades, and you get a 2-year warranty. It also does go into some detail there about the additional sockets and processors that it's compatible with, and on the back we get pretty much more of the same. On the other side we go into more of the technical specifications, such as the fan RPMs, noise levels, etc, etc. The actual weight of this thing is actually pretty lightweight, and you're looking at around about 490 grams, which actually for one of these tower coolers is about where you need to be to have enough thermal mass to get the job done, but to not be too heavy to try and break your socket off. So let's take out the box and see what we actually get. So first of all, we've got some nice styrofoam, which is always good to see, keeps things nice and safe in transit. First up, we've got the fan itself. This is the Tornado fan from GELID, and again, RPM wise, around about 750 up to 1600 RPM. And it does have those really nice looking blades, which have got the kind of dual action. So this actually makes it really good for in those lower RPMs to still keep that static pressure up. So yeah, it looks pretty good. The only thing I have noticed immediately is there doesn't seem to be any kind of rubber dampeners or anything in the corners or the mounting points. This is all plastic construction. So I wonder how that is going to deal with the vibrations that normally come through a fan. I guess we'll find out very shortly. Next up is the actual tower cooler itself, and this is finished in a kind of nickel coated section on the heat pipes, and yeah, pretty much the usual deal. Soldered ends at the top there, so that's all well and good, and the fin density looks actually relatively well spaced, so that should be good for airflow, getting the heat from one side through to the other. Some of the fins you get on some of these are very, very dense, which means you need a very, very high RPM or a very high static pressure fan to actually get the air through the unit, but yeah, that looks pretty decent. Also at the bottom, you've got a heat sink as well on the main section where the heat pipes are. So that in itself, once there's a little bit of air going through there, that will actually aid cooling. There is also on the bottom a removable tab to expose the heat pipes, and the heat pipes themselves and the actual base plate do look to be exceptionally flat and very well machined, pretty much to a mirror finish. Nice to see. Next up, clips. And finally we get our installation section. So what have we got in here? So there is some GC Pro thermal compound, which is always nice to see rather than it being pre-applied. I really do like to see a separate container so you can obviously install it, reuse it, etc. And normally with these kind of size tubes, you can probably get 3 or 4 decent applications out of that. Next up is our AMD mounting section. So this is for your standard AMD stuff. So this is AM2, AM2+, AM3, AM3+, etc, etc. And there's installation instructions in there also. Next up, there's a separate bag with your AM4 mounting section. So this has got a slightly different angle on the actual arms, and also slightly different depth for the actual mounting tension that goes onto the cooler itself. So good to see that they've actually remade the entire package pretty much for the AM4 setup, which realistically these days is pretty much the most popular setup. Also, we've got the kind of main bag. So in there is the older AM3 bars. We've also got a Intel backplate and also a AM3 backplate. So we've got holes there for AM3 and the wider ones for your Intel setups. So yeah, all good. Appears to be all the bases are completely covered. So next up is probably the best thing to do is to start assembling it and see what it's actually like. So mounting the AM4 arms, actually very simple. All it requires is 4 screws, and this screws into the bottom plate, which we'll get you some close-ups of so you can see what that looks like, but you get the general idea. So that is the normal AM4 layout. Then all we need to do is to attach the fan, and when it comes to installation, you've got these spring-loaded springs which can go through there. We may or may not be able to do them up by hand, but I think really a screwdriver would be beneficial. There is some clearance on the side to allow you to do that, so that's fine. Although I think realistically this is going to be one of those jobs which is much better with a motherboard actually out of the system rather than in the system. Unfortunately in this particular instance I'm going to be doing a testing on my Ryzen 5 3600 and the motherboard is in the system, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, very straightforward so far. So the next thing to do is to actually attach the fan. Now this is the bit that I always dislike because I really don't like spring clips. Now I have actually taken this out already, and in our live stream we did a couple of Saturdays ago, or was it last Saturday, I had a go at putting this on, and I got to be honest with you, I did struggle. The instructions weren't particularly clear, and whether it was because I was doing it live or whatever, I'm not too sure what the deal was, but it just didn't go particularly well. So all we need to do is to put the springs into the front of the fan, which in the instructions actually shows put them into the back of the fan, which just doesn't work at all. So once you've got your spring set up, make sure the fan is pretty much centralized, and then all you need to do, hold the fan in place, and then with the side section just lower that and it clips into place. Holding it still, twist it around a little bit, and then do exactly the same on the other side. Now that went so much easier than it did in my previous attempt, and looks like I've lined it up pretty well. The spring is slightly proud of the top of the heat pipe, so that is going to give us a couple of extra millimeters in clearance issues, but for our particular case it's going to be fine. You can, if you want to, you can slide the fan either up or down if you've got any kind of memory issues with high memory. So there is probably about, getting on for about 10 millimeters of adjustment either up or down on the fan, so that should suit most setups. So let's put it in the PC and we'll do some tests and see how it goes. So the cooler has been installed and we've tried out with our Ryzen 5 3600, and I've got to be honest with you, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. And my testing methodology is a little bit different from previous ones, but I have included some results from previous tests that I've done just to give you a rough idea. Now it's not a scientific test by any means, but it'll certainly give you an idea of price to performance ratios. Installation was relatively straightforward. I say that hesitantly because I hate spring clips on fans, and also the mounting mechanism for the AM4 bracket isn't the greatest. Skill will be required just to get this to install due to the way that the AMD backplate is actually attached, or not attached as the case may be. If you're putting this in a case where you've got the motherboard installed already, there's a very high likelihood of the backplate just pushing out whilst you're trying to get some tension on the spring mountings. Obviously if you're mounting this into a motherboard straight out of the box on a flat surface, it is going to be very, very straightforward. Now one thing I did notice as well, if you are actually trying to mount it in the vertical situation with the motherboard upright, when you go to put through your screws such as these, actually in, because of the weight of the screw and also the length of it, it's got a tendency to kind of wobble downwards. So you are going to need a pretty decent magnetic screwdriver and some dexterity to actually hold it in place if you're mounting it vertically. Obviously if you're mounting it in the horizontal fashion, then it just drops in and it isn't too bad at all. But it certainly is a little bit on the tricky side. It's not the easiest mounting method I've ever used, that's for certainly sure. With that out of the way, the installation, after it is done, actually the results are very, very pleasing. Now I'll quickly go through this slide to let you know what the details are on there so you can get an idea of what is going on here. So in the slide, we've got the different tabs here. So at the moment we've got the ambient temperature of 21 degrees, which is at the bottom in blue. We've then got the lowest temperature recorded. This is with the fan in PWM mode. So we've got 32 degrees, which is pretty much where we'd expect to be in PWM mode. The highest temperature recorded, now this is after a loop of Cinebench R20 for about 5 minutes, up to 67 degrees, which actually isn't too bad at all. And at the top there we've got our price, and that is actually in GB pounds. So £22 for that kind of level of performance, I personally think is actually brilliant value for money. So let's take a comparison and see how this compares against some of the other coolers we've reviewed previously. So this is a comparison of the GELID Tornado versus the Noctua NHU-12S and also the XPG Levant AIO. And as you can see, we've got a broad spread there. Again, we've got our price in GBP, which probably does need to be taken into consideration. Obviously, it's £22, it's basically a quarter of the price of the XPG. Obviously, it is a much more basic cooler, but looking at the temperature results, Our highest recorded temperature on the GELID was 67 degrees C, and with the XPG Levant, we're looking at 59 degrees C. And actually with the Noctua NHU-12S, we're looking at 65 degrees C. Now there was a slight difference in the temperature between the room on the initial testing, so do take off maybe 1 degree, maybe 1.5 degrees. But certainly even with that said, I think this is actually a fantastic turnout for the GELID Tornado. And again, with the lowest temperatures recorded, pretty much neck and neck with the Noctua, give or take a degree, which is pretty much within the error of margin, and obviously the XPG Levant with the extra thermal mass of the 240ml cooler does reduce it considerably, another 3 degrees or so. So to summarise, not the easiest to install, if I'm completely honest with you, but certainly an excellent performer. Now this does certainly put it into the territory of other 120ml coolers such as the Cooler Master 212 Evo, the Thermal Take Contact 12, Freezer 34, Freezer 33, etc, etc. They all do behave relatively similarly, and if you change the compound, thermal compound, and also mess around with the fans and the profiles, chances are most of them you'll get within kind of spitting distance of each other. So really where it comes down to is, for me, price primarily and ease of use. Now price wise, obviously at £22 here in the UK, this is a great deal. There are some other deals out there on the market, and we've seen recently from the Corsair, the A500, which was dramatically reduced down to around about £35 recently. That does represent fantastic value for money, but we're yet to see how that performs, and we will add that to our comparison list. But on a normal day, normal pricing without any kind of weird COVID stuff going on or any special discounts, at £22, this is amongst the cheapest of the 120ml tower coolers, at least of those with a reputable brand. Obviously there's loads of Chinese branded coolers on the market, which generally turn out to be pretty naff. So for me, at the moment, this definitely gets the seal of approval. So I'll put some affiliated links in the video description below so you can check out for yourself. But yeah, I certainly think this is a winner, especially for the price. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.